So hi everybody, thanks so much for coming. I am here in Mountain View and we've got a full packed room. Our room is a little tight, but thanks for being here. And on the live stream, I know there's many of you joining us from around everywhere in Google, and just thrilled that you're here, so thanks so much. Today we are hosting Dr. Rick Hanson, who is here. He is a local in the Bay Area, and he's going to be talking about his new book, Resilient, which has a lot of really good data where he blends in his expertise in neuroscience, mindfulness, positive psychology, his clinical psychologist background, and like Van said, speaks to what we can create for ourselves if we are conscious to what we want to create. So I'm just really excited to learn more. And I also want to thank you, Rick, on behalf of Google for being here. And I also have learned through the GPAUSE program and the work in emotional intelligence that I do that if we change our mind, we change our lives, we change our brain. And that is the mantra that my mentor, Judith Wright, has taught me. And that is what Rick is here to tell us today. So I'm just thrilled to hear more. And it's all about savoring, right, Rick? We're going to be savoring. So as you are here for the hour, this is our practical application of the hour, is just savor what you learned today. How are you going to apply it? Just know that you're in the here and now with Rick and all of us, and we can change our lives, change our mind, change our brain. It's really, really cool. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Rick. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a really enthusiastic introduction. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That's great. It's an honor for me to be here. I'm a complete fan and actually very grateful for Google's place in the world. And to have a full house here of really, really smart people interested in this material just really touches me. What I want to explore with you fundamentally is the how of changing the brain for the better. And that general purpose, how, can then be applied to any particular thing we want to develop, any particular form of skillfulness, any beneficial state of being, any useful attitude. Happiness altogether is something that we can develop as well. And to make a point at the beginning that I'll make again in the middle, it's really striking for someone like me who's been in the growth business, the growth game, for pushing 50 years now almost. I started young in the human potential movement, and along the way became a mindfulness teacher, a clinical psychologist, a neuropsychologist. It's really interesting to me that for those of us that are in the business of growth, and by growth, I mean the term quite broadly, to include learning of skillfulness, social skillfulness, healing, personal development, that for those of us who are in this territory, we still lack a general theory of growth. We have a general theory of attachment, we have a general theory of how people, for example, might develop particular things such as self-compassion, but there's actually no general theory of growth, which in a funny kind of way would be the most useful thing to have, because then it could be applied to any particular thing to develop. And so what I'd like to do in a fairly brisk way, moving right along here, is to explore this material with you, particularly with an emphasis on pragmatic, immediately applicable tools. And I know the slides will be available to you later. There's also a lot of supportive material about this on my website, including a kind of greatest hits collection of scientific papers in the public domain, and other resources there too. You can learn more about it there as well. So here I'm going to try to move straight into a fairly direct summary of how to engage volitional, psychological, mental factors inside your own mind that increases the registration of experiences that you're having, and thereby increases their conversion into lasting physical changes of neural structure and function, which is the fundamental process of any kind of lasting change for the better. So that's what I'm going to be exploring with you here. Okay? So here we go. They said the way to do this is to zip along, and then at about, when there are about 15 minutes left, slow down for questions and discussion. I'm also going to do a little bit of experiential practice, utterly voluntary, along the way. And as Rachel said in the beginning, the opportunity inside our own minds, in a sense, is to do experiments there, to treat it as a kind of laboratory in which we see the results from what's called the first-person perspective of subjectivity, while at the same time being able to draw plausible conclusions from a third-person perspective about actually what might be happening physically inside our own brain. Right. So that's my intro. Let's get to it. So I want to talk with you to begin with about the notion of inner resources, psychological strengths of various kinds. If we are to have any kind of lasting well-being in a changing world, we need to be resilient, not just for surviving the worst day of our life, but thriving every day of our life. Or to use a traditional saying, through resilience, we're able to walk evenly over uneven ground. I think of resilience a lot like having a deep keel in your personal sailboat. Having capsized a sailboat, when I was learning how to sail, I've really come to appreciate the value of a deep keel. Resilience is our deep keel. It enables us to recover fairly rapidly, and in particular, over the course of a day, or at work or in a relationship, we can keep on going with that deep keel in the water. So to have any kind of lasting happiness, well-being broadly, we need to be resilient. All right, what do we need to be resilient? Where does resilience come from? Fundamentally, resilience comes from internal resources, and the development and use of internal resources is in a larger frame that's commonly used in healthcare and psychology that says that the course of a person's life over a day, a week, or the entire lifetime is in effect an equation with three variables. It's the result of the combination of three factors: the challenges that wear upon a person, the vulnerabilities they penetrate through, like chinks in a person's armor, and the resources the person draws upon to deal with those challenges and to shore up vulnerabilities. It's a nice and very useful and simple model. All three are opportunities to make things better. I tend to focus on resources because it's forward-looking and tends to be positive, and also because challenges and vulnerabilities can often be intractable, and yet we're surrounded by opportunities one way or another to grow resources. Okay, so where are challenges, vulnerabilities, and resources located? Out in the world, in the body, and in the mind. This gives us, my inner geek, a 3x3 matrix, if you think about it, obviously. 9 cells, challenges, vulnerabilities, resources, world, body, mind. Bing, 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 the 9th cell, resources in the mind, is full of opportunity because we can intervene there directly, and we take the fruits with us wherever we go. So that's what I'm going to focus on here in this larger frame. I'm not against helping things be better in those other 8 ways, if you will, but I'm going to focus on resources in the mind. All right. Resources in the mind include familiar things like mindfulness. Mindfulness is a fundamental mental or psychological resource. Other resources include classic character virtues like modesty or thrift. I was a Boy Scout in a very rebellious troop. We caused a lot of trouble. I remember 4 things, I think. Boy Scout is thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent, something like that. I didn't remember the rest of them. Those are virtues. Skills are inner resources. Know-how. Both technical know-how applied on the job, as well as interpersonal know-how and intrapersonal know-how, knowing how to manage one's own reactions and to manage the flow of one's thoughts and feelings. That's procedural learning. That's learning how to. Other inner resources include positive emotions, love, moral commitments, good intentions. Those are inner resources too. So the question then becomes, how do we develop them? The harder a person's life is, the more important it is to develop inner resources. It's easy to think about this sort of material as cherries on the frosting of the cake of life. Oh yeah, when everything's fine, I'm going to savor the moment. Well, the worst things are, if you think about it, and the more that a person is on their own, the cavalry is not coming. And many people experience life this way these days. The more important it is, as the foundation of self-reliance, a kind of old school, scruffy determination to do what we can in any moment to grow as much as possible from here, because there's nothing we can do about the past, the more important it is to have inner resources. So that's a key context here, that I'm speaking about this material not as some sort of add-on for people who are very privileged. Okay? Researchers generally have focused on identifying and using psychological resources, such as workplace mindfulness. Really good. It's good to identify it. It's good to apply it. But what about acquiring it in the first place? That's actually been really lacking in most of the research on inner resources, including recent research on things like character strengths. So how do we develop them? What's the possibility here? Well, if you look at research on the nature-nurture question, the ballpark is that at least half, if not even up to about 2/3 of the variation in human attributes, by psychological attributes, is not due to heritable factors. In other words, roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the variation on average has to do with heritable factors, kind of woven early into DNA. The other opportunity, though, is what we can acquire over time. That is really, really good news. It also takes us to a fundamental responsibility. No one can stop us from growing resources inside ourselves, from learning and growing over the course of a day. No one can stop us from trying to do that inside the inner sanctuary of our own mind. But no one can do it for us as well, which to me gives a kind of credibility to the results of those forms of inner practice. So if we are to grow inner resources in the mind, that fundamentally means changing the brain. Because inside the natural frame, whatever mysteries may lie outside the natural frame, inside the natural frame, which is certainly where I'm going to be speaking today and where I generally operate, any kind of lasting change of mind must involve a lasting change of body, in particular in the nervous system and its headquarters, the brain. So how do we do it? How do we get those green balls into the brain? This takes us to self-directed neuroplasticity, a term coined by Jeffrey Schwartz at UCLA 15, 20 years ago. To put things in context, neuroscience is a baby science. So much has been just discovered in the last year or two, let alone, and definitely the last decade or two. So new things are being seen all the time, and it's really an exciting, to me, territory. So, an overview of current research. What is very well known is that mental practices A produce mental results C, presumably via the black box B of the brain. That's the first point. There's much research that mental efforts produce psychological results. Can. There's also a tremendous amount of research that's invasive and ethically question marked on non-human animals that various stimuli, presumably with experiential correlates, lead to lasting changes in their brains. And through very invasive research, the granularity of what's been discovered is really quite extraordinary. So there's here too a lot of evidence that the experiences of any kind of a complex animal can lead to lasting physical changes in the nervous system. This is the basis of what's called experience-dependent neuroplasticity. There's some research on humans that their experiences, including meditative practice, mindfulness practice, can change their brains over time. There's a little research on, to me, the stuff that's really, really useful to know about, which is how can people relate to the experiences they're having? How can they relate to the emotions they're having, the sensations in their body, the ideas that they're having, the intentions, the wants that they're experiencing? How can they relate to those experiences to maximize the gain from them, to maximize the lasting impact? There's a little bit of research about that, which is scattered here and there, in which I've tried to pull together, but I want to be modest and appropriate about what is and is not known with regard to that. And last, there's one study, my study actually, disclosure, on the systematic training in the mental factors, volitional mental factors, that plausibly can steepen people's growth curves as they grow through life. This study is in process. I'm running up the results with collaborators from the University of California. It's not yet peer-reviewed. All disclaimers said. Happily, we've gotten really good results. It would be so embarrassing if we hadn't. But anyway, that's the status of the research. In this context, then, I want to talk with you about what's plausible. And then we can start engaging the laboratory immediately inside ourselves to see what the real results are. All right? So In this context of some, modesty, the learning process, the change process, fundamentally happens in two stages, two necessary and sufficient stages. We begin, in almost all cases, with an experience. There is some learning that occurs through unconscious processes, but the great bulk of human development, healing, transformation, even awakening, begins with an experience of one kind or another. There are different terms that are used for the experience. I like experience because it's kind of direct, it makes it clear. Neurologically, we could talk about encoding. We could use the general term I use for activation in terms of a phase, or an old-fashioned word, state, some kind of state of being. State of mind, state of attitude, state of intention, state of sensation, some kind of state. That's the necessary first step, but it's not sufficient. There must be the second stage of learning for any kind of lasting value. And you're probably starting to see the critique that I'm mounting here of most efforts, including my own, to help people have some kind of lasting value, some kind of lasting benefit from something. We must engage the second stage of learning. Call it what you will. I call it the installation stage. I have a cybernetic kind of view of things in many ways, so to me it makes sense. Activation, installation. In neurological terms, we would speak of consolidation, or kind of, in simple language, the movement from state to trait. This is a fundamental two-stage process. The second stage is necessary, and it's one we routinely forget. This two-stage process is summarized in the kind of increasingly well-known saying from the work of the Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb: neurons that fire together, wire together. I've actually had some grad students turn that into a rap video for me. It's pretty cool, but I don't sing myself. People pay me not to sing. But here's this fundamental process: fire together, wire together. It's actually more complicated than that. I won't go through every little bit on this slide. You can look at it later if you like. It's a summary of the major mechanisms of experience-dependent neuroplasticity, the many ways in which the nervous system is designed to be transformed, in effect, by the information flowing through it that, as immaterial information does, it is represented by some material substrate. The flows of information that are the basis for experiences moving through the nervous system enlist underlying neural processes to represent them, and repeated patterns of underlying neural processing leave lasting traces behind, leave lasting changes behind. And the fundamental notion of experience-dependent neuroplasticity is not breaking news. It's been presumed for a long time that any kind of learning, broadly defined, learning to walk instead of crawling, learning how to be more patient while raising teenagers, I had to work on that one myself, any kind of real learning must involve a physical change, presumably primarily in the brain. That's not a new idea. The real news in neuroplasticity is the extraordinary degree to which these changes can proceed, and the breadth and depth of the remodeling process of the nervous system, especially the cerebral cortex, that can occur as we develop and change, for better or worse in life. All right? So the essence of the process I just went through that moves from state to trait, and you can apply it to many ordinary experiences, think about the acquisition of greater trait mindfulness. It begins with experiences of mindfulness, which then, in some way, incidentally or deliberately, leave lasting traces behind in the body, especially in the nervous system. We become more compassionate, more resilient, more grateful, more skillful with other people, more skillful with ourselves by having experiences of these things, which then are internalized, installed in some way, leading to lasting changes behind. But here's a key point, a key critique. Knowing does not equal experiencing, and experiencing does not equal learning. Think about the large percentage of useful experiences we have, useful moments where we're happy about something, or we understand something, or we feel committed to something, or we kind of move into a really nice state of being, we're kind of in a zone, and then whoosh, it's gone. We can't find our way back to it again. For me, as a longtime clinical psychologist, longtime therapist, teacher and other roles, including in business consulting, it's humbling to appreciate how many hard-won moments that people were having, useful thoughts, good intentions, ways of feeling at ease, released in some way, et cetera, how large a fraction of them wash through the brain like water through a sieve without leaving any lasting value behind. And if anybody like myself is involved in helping others change for the better, as a manager, as a parent, as an educator, as a coach, as someone engaged in the larger world, it's really, to me, right at the bullseye of what we should focus on, which is how to increase the conversion rate from states to traits. How do we help useful moments really land in the heart of ourselves and other people so they take root there and really sink in? So that's what I want to focus on with you now, the plausible, practical neuropsychology of actually how to do this. How do we actually steepen the conversion rate from state to trait? Without doing that, we tend to flatten the gains from programs. We also, in particular, if you think of the distribution of results in various trainings, including formal mindfulness trainings, usually about a third to half the people in them don't get much out of them, drop out, they don't practice, or they get gains. They say, well, that was amazing. But then 10 days later, they're as neurotic as ever. I can speak from some personal experience here about myself there. So if we don't pay attention to this installation phase of learning, we're going to lose all kinds of opportunities. To put it in a certain way, I think about 4 schematic lives. Think of anything you want to develop, mental resource on that side. Happiness, calm, self-confidence, self-worth, no longer being haunted by childhood experiences, greater habit of skillfulness with other people. What do we want to develop? Well, imagine one life that just goes downhill, right? That's the decline. This person at the end of that period, a day, a year, a life, is less happy, less wise, less capable than they were then when they started. Then we have the second life, schematically, flat. No decline, but no gain in terms of the outcome values on the y-axis that we care about, the mental resources axis. What about then the person who has linear growth? This person is getting stronger, getting happier, getting more loving, getting calmer, let's say, over time. That's great. And then we have the person who's learning how to learn along the way. The person whose growth curve takes an exponential course. And to me, where the takeaway is to really stare hard at that and go, wow, in things that I care about or things that, frankly, my friends and family or therapists tell me I really ought to care about, what's my trend? Is it an upward trend? What's the delta? How steep is that curve? And can I start moving into exponential growth? What can we do to steepen our growth curves? I think of this process in a kind of old school way as we're growing strengths inside. To me, learning, very broadly defined, especially emotional learning, not so much book learning or intellectual learning, but social learning, intrapersonal learning, motivational learning, learning how to motivate yourself, learning how to lean into what's good for yourself and others. This kind of learning, broadly defined, I think of as the strength of strengths, because it's the strength that grows the rest of them. Okay. So this point is really sharpened, the general point about importance of focusing on acquisition and development and what aids acquisition that's under internal control that we can do ourselves. This point is really sharpened when you face what scientists call the brain's evolved negativity bias. A simple way of putting it, I put it, is that we've got a brain that's basically by design like Velcro for bad experiences, but like Teflon for good ones. We all have experiences of, what? Well, we all have a sense of this. You go through a day, 10 things happen in a relationship with someone at work or at home. 9 of them are good. 1 of them is bad, unpleasant, harmful. What's the one you brood about as you're falling asleep, right? Or I think about performance reviews. 19, right, like 10 points of feedback, 9 are really good, 1 is room for improvement. What's the one you just brood on? You just think about room for improvement, for the rest of the week, right? That's the negativity bias. So by design, if you think about it, our ancestors needed to get carrots and avoid sticks. Carrots like food, sticks like predators, both are important, but there's a key difference. If you fail to get that carrot today back in the Serengeti Plains, you'll have a chance of one tomorrow, probably. If you fail to avoid that predator, or that aggression inside your band or between bands. Potentially no more carrots forever. Sticks are more consequential, typically, in terms of raw survival and the passing on of genes that pass on genes, the engine of biological evolution. Sticks have more urgency and impact. So by design, we've got a brain that does 5 things automatically, routinely, and you can watch your mind, therefore your brain, doing it. Scan for bad news, over-focus upon it, overreact to it, fast-track it into memory, especially emotional memory, implicit memory, and then along the way, through the activity of the stress hormone cortisol, gradually become sensitized to stressful, irritating, frustrating, annoying experiences, so we're just a little more reactive to them the day after that, which then, as you can see, creates a vicious cycle. And in the process of all this, as our brains change in this way, by design, we tend to create negative cycles with others that then continue to change our brain in that way. That's the fundamental negativity bias. It's a kind of universal, well-intended learning disability, the result of having a brain optimized for peak performance in Stone Age conditions. We learn very rapidly from experiences of disappointment or frustration or self-doubt or self-criticism. We learn really quickly. Once burned, twice shy. Never forget. Those red balls go right into the brain. They're fast-tracked in. But because of the focus on the red balls draws us away from sustaining attention to the green balls, which are not prioritized for storage, so they need extra help so that they actually can lead to lasting changes of neural structure and function. And I'm going to talk about how to do that now. All right, so the negativity bias, right? A lot of implications there. Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist, won a Nobel Prize in economics for his work on loss aversion, the ways that people are typically much more motivated by not losing something rather than by gaining the equivalent amount or reward. There's been a lot of research on the negativity bias. So by the way, in my slides, I have, I think, 7 slides worth of references in small print at the back, including a couple of great papers that are literature reviews on the negativity bias. It's really interesting to think of the consequences of that, including in our own life. All right, Velcro, Teflon. Okay, so how do we do it? I want to talk about the how now. How do we get lasting gains from passing experiences? How can we increase the conversion rate, in effect, of beneficial states? And I use the word beneficial pragmatically as that which is useful, that which promotes happiness and welfare for ourselves and others. How can we increase the conversion rate from beneficial states to beneficial traits? Here's where I use a framework that I've developed called the HEAL framework that summarizes the plausible internal factors we can mobilize to increase over a time scale typically of a dozen or less seconds, that we can plausibly engage these mental factors to increase the conversion rate of experiences we're having into some kind of lasting change of neural structure and function. This framework is pragmatic and eclectic. I've just pulled a lot of stuff together. You'll recognize things that skillful teachers are already doing or you're already doing yourself inside your own mind as I talk through this. And then we'll do a little experiential practice, explore the implications, and then I'll shut up and we'll discuss it. All right? Okay. So this is the fundamental neuropsychology of learning. We begin with an experience, have some kind of beneficial experience, and then we move into the installation phase, which has 2 subjectively and objectively distinct aspects. I call them enriching and absorbing. In actual practice, they sort of mush together, but they're actually distinct. Enriching, subjectively, is like having a large, sustained, powerful, intense experience. It's enriched. Absorbing, subjectively, is like receiving it into yourself, giving over to it, feeling like literally it's sinking in, like almost a warmth spreading inside. The distinction there. Objectively, enriching an experience presumably means a very large, sustained, spread, and intense pattern of neural activation. Absorbing is about turning up the sensitivity, the gain as it were, in the internal memory-making machinery of the brain. To use a bit of a metaphor, enriching is like getting a really rich green liquid sitting on top of a sponge, So now it's really dense and vivid and bright green and concentrated. And then absorbing is like picking a sponge or helping the sponge become especially receptive to the experience that's landing in it. In practice, as I said, these two sort of mush together, but I'm being opportunistic here and looking for anything that can help the registration of an experience. So enriching, we help the experience be big. There are 5 fundamental factors of enriching. I have a lot of slides, and in the back I have supplementary slides that get into this. I'll just name these 5 factors right now. The longer we experience something, the more it tends to get encoded and consolidated. So duration, over the course, let's say, of a breath or 2 or longer. Second, the intensity. That's another factor of enriching. The more intensely we feel something, the more it's going to tend to be internalized. Third is what I call multimodality. It's a funny word for the more aspects of the experience we're aware of, the more impact it's going to have. So I think of experiences as having essentially 5 aspects. The more of these that we engage, the better. There's the thought track, which includes imagery, the perception track, particularly body sensations, the emotion track of experience, like a song has 5 tracks to it, kind of. So there's the emotion track. Then there's the desire track, very important. The intentions, the wants, the values, the purposes, the plans, the longings in the heart. And then there's the action track, the sense of embodied behavioral action, including facial expressions and subtleties of posture. The more of these that are engaged, as any kindergarten teacher knows, the more impact experiences are going to have. So that's the third factor of enriching. And the other 2 are novelty. The brain is a novelty detector. What's the news? It's always looking for something new. So if we engage our experiences with what's called beginner's mind, they're more likely to have an impact. If we bring a freshness, a child mind, a sense of not knowing to experience, it's going to tend to have more impact. And then last, personal relevance. Why would it matter to me, for example, to have an experience today of feeling respected and included by others, given my childhood and my high school experiences in which I felt like an odd duck and I was cast out? Why would it be meaningful to me today to really register that my tricky conversations with my partner go better when I lean in and sustain attention rather than space out and withdraw? How can I help that really land inside me because it's personally relevant? Okay, 5 factors of enriching, then absorbing. Let it sink in. Essence of absorbing is to intend to receive the experience, to sense it's coming in, and to focus on its value. Because as we focus on what's rewarding about an experience, what's enjoyable about it, or personally meaningful, that increases activity of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain, these fundamental neurotransmitter systems. And as their activity increase in proportion to or in relation to the sense of reward, as that happens, the experiences we're having are flagged as keepers for protection and long-term storage. We're more likely to retain or to be changed for the better by those experiences that feel rewarding. I think about so many times I've been a therapist talking with a client who just sort of droning on, and I'm droning on myself. We're both bored. Yeah, your mother, yeah, mother, my mother, your mother, mother's, my father, my brother, my this. Yeah, really. There's no change that's going to happen, right? Usually. There needs to be more of a sense of reward. Okay, that's the fundamental process of change. To use a metaphor of a fire, we begin with the fire. We have fire, usually because it's already happening. We're already having the experience, or we might deliberately create it. And then we protect the fire by enriching it. We add logs to it so it burns more brightly. And then in absorb, we take the warmth of the fire into ourselves. That's the fundamental process. The optional 4th step in the change process I call linking. Again, I didn't invent the elements in these. I have invented this framework and its application and its grounding, as I'll get to, in evolutionary neuropsychology. But in linking, as we have familiar experiences with, we're aware of 2 things at once, positive and negative. Mindful awareness, spacious mindfulness, is a form of linking if what we're aware of is painful. Because we're aware of what's painful, let's say, while at the same time being rested in an untroubled spaciousness of awareness, which is itself never tainted or disturbed or damaged by what it represents, by what passes through it. We've also had other natural experiences of linking where we're mad about something and we talk ourselves off the ledge, or we're rattled in some way and we reach down for some kind of memory of a supportive relationship or a previous time when we handled that challenge to kind of give ourselves perspective and to soothe ourselves and to reorient and encourage ourselves. That's linking as well. In really a quite formal way. For example, a person, let's say, could be aware of a beneficial experience in the foreground of awareness of being really seen and wanted in a healthy way and valued by another person, while at the same time off to the side having old feelings of being dismissed and left out and overlooked and rejected. And because neurons that fire together wire together, if a person sustains the positive experience and keeps it big, while the negative is off to the side of awareness, then the positive will tend to associate with it and soothe and ease and eventually even replace it. Sort of like using flowers to crowd out weeds and then eventually uproot them. Linking is optional because it's not inherently necessary for the change process to occur, and also because sometimes that negative material can really suck you right in. Don't underestimate the power, et cetera, et cetera. It can really grab you away. The key to linking is to keep the positive bigger so that it soothes and eases the negative rather than the negative contaminating the positive. The essence is really simple. Have it, enjoy it. The two-stage process. Have the experience and take it in. I like the word savoring, which Rachel used, but I tend to use words beyond savoring because many of the experiences we're trying to internalize, much of what we're trying to grow inside ourselves, isn't really relevant to savoring. For example, we have a clear idea. I had a really powerful idea in my mid-20s that growing up I had been a nerd but not a wimp. That was a very useful idea for me to register. It wasn't that I would savor it, but wow, did I really want to help that one sink in. Other examples are where we're more skillful with another person. We don't really savor the sense of skillfulness. We just want to really help it land, kind of as a one-trial learner, as they say in behaviorism. So the next time it happens, we move into that way of being just kind of naturally. That said, I like the word savoring, but it's not applicable to everything. But the fundamental process is one of internalization. So you want to try something experiential? That'd be good. Try to practice what I'm preaching here. So let's just try it really fast. We're going to do a little mini experiment, and then I'll move to a wrap with two kind of overarching perspectives. So most of the time that we have a beneficial experience, it's already occurring. We just need to notice it. Think of all those moments where we have a sense of accomplishment, getting one thing done after another, or a sense of friendliness or camaraderie with others, or some kind of insight into how to be in the future. We have the experience. We see the flower, we have a moment of, oh, it looks nice out there. But then we just move on from it. We don't harvest the value of it. So most of the time, we're just noticing experiences that are already there. That said, there's completely a place for self-activating states of mind. That's central to coping, to functioning, and central to spiritual practice as well, at the other end of the spectrum, if you will, if that's of interest to you. So to begin with, then I'll move it through and I'll say less. Notice that as you exhale, you are naturally relaxing. The parasympathetic wing of the nervous system handles exhaling, naturally slowing the heart and relaxing. And then as you foreground into awareness this experience that's already happening in the background of relaxing while exhaling, you don't need to change your breathing. Your breathing might naturally change as you focus here. Then you can sink in increasingly, enriching and absorbing this sense of relaxation. So I'll be quiet for 30 seconds. So you just do a little internal experiment. you might have a sense of encouraging relaxation to establish itself more in you as a kind of resting state. One bit at a time, one synapse at a time, growing trait relaxation. Okay, that was the first experiment. Second one, gratitude, gladness. Here's where we're going to create an experience. If you like, bring to mind one or more things you feel glad about or grateful for. And help yourself move from thoughts of things you are grateful for or glad about to an increasingly embodied, emotionally saturated experience of gratitude. And then as you settle into a sense of gratitude, kind of marinate in it. Let yourself really feel it. Maybe bring a little smile to your face. So I'll be quiet here too as you take in the good of gratitude. If your mind wanders, that's completely natural, just bring it back. In effect, in meditative language, for half a minute, you'd be taking gratitude as your object of attention. And as your mind rests upon any particular thing, that tends to be internalized. Okay, finishing up here. As with any practice, we're doing two things. We're trying to do something inside our minds, and we're observing the results inside the laboratory. And if it's difficult to activate an experience at will, such as gratitude, that's a bit of a flag to look for opportunities to build up that trait. Also, if there's any difficulty sustaining attention to a positive experience, or difficulty really receiving it into yourself, that's a little bit of a flag to yourself for further investigation. And then the last one, warm-heartedness, perhaps compassion, perhaps kindness, bringing to mind one or more beings you care about, you have warm feelings for. Could be friends, could be a pet, an animal companion, could be a group of people you care about. And then as you do this, help yourself move from the idea of this to feelings of warmth, caring, even love. Here too, I'll be quiet for half a minute. It's a real interesting process to observe your mind and see what is it like to help something establish itself more inside yourself. You know, what's the process of helping kindness to establish itself more in you? Or compassion for others. What's that like? It's a really interesting and useful inquiry. Okay, so finishing up the little experiment. I'm on the home stretch now. I want to sort of step back a bit and take a wider view and then open it up for discussion. So there are, I think, 4 distinct kinds of benefits for taking in the good, which is my informal general term for the deliberate internalization of beneficial experiences, which is the technical definition of what we've been exploring here, or what could be called mindful cultivation, or others, and I use the term positive neuroplasticity. First, we grow specific resources inside. That's good. both in general and for particular purposes, which I'll speak to in a moment. Second, there are implicit benefits in this practice of mindful cultivation. For example, it's a training in mindfulness. And also implicit in it is a stance of being for oneself, treating oneself as if one matters, which is worthy in its own right, and especially worthy if it's a corrective to not feeling like you've mattered enough to others in the past. Third, it's quite plausible that in this process of internalization of beneficial experiences, we're sensitizing the brain to positive beneficial experiences, much as the brain can be very readily sensitized to negative experiences. There's emerging research that quite possibly it can become increasingly sensitized to positive ones, so it becomes more efficient and effective at converting those experiences into a lasting change of neural structure and function. And then last, as we grow the good inside ourselves, the world tends to look a little different. It sometimes can treat us differently, which gives us an opportunity to grow more good inside ourselves in a positive upward spiral. Or as Lao Tzu, I think, put it many, many years ago, if you keep a green bough in your heart, a singing bird will come. All right. And now for a wider perspective, I've spoken here about the general process of self-directed neuroplasticity, self-directed brain change. You can apply that general process to growing particular resources inside yourself. Resilience is used to meet needs. What are the needs that resilience is relevant for? And then how can we identify and grow resources inside that are matched to the needs we might have? If we run out of gas, a spare tire won't help us. It's not matched to the issue. If we have a flat tire, now that resource is matched to it. So you might really ask yourself, I think one of the most useful questions from a long career in clinical psychology, what, if it were more present in the mind of a person, would really help? Would help with this workplace issue, would help with some kind of family problem, would help just heal the residues of the past, or to feel happier altogether. What, if it were more present, would really, really help? I use as a map for this the framework of the 3 needs that have been identified in a lot of research as our fundamental needs for safety, satisfaction, and connection. There are other needs models. I don't think everything that's important to people fits neatly into this framework, but this is a really fundamental framework. And we manage safety by avoiding, in general, avoiding harms, manage satisfaction by approaching rewards, and connection attaching to others. You can see the general framework here. These 3 overarching motivational and regulatory systems, avoiding, approaching, and attaching, are loosely but significantly related to the 3-stage evolution of the human brain. This is the so-called triune brain model. It's a little fuzzy around the details, but the essence is pretty much there. That as our ancestors over 600 million years evolved a nervous system, rule 1 in the wild is eat lunch today, don't be lunch today, live to see the sunrise. That's the reptilian brainstem, very, very highly focused on safety needs. Then we have the mammalian subcortex, very, very focused on satisfaction. Mammals can sustain pursuit. Reptiles generally can't. Mammals can also hunt at night. I'm very fond of our scruffy mammalian rat-like, squirrel-like ancestors evolving about 200 million years ago when dinosaurs ruled the earth. But they were crafty and tough, and they survived 65 million years ago when something big smacked into the planet and the dinosaurs became extinct. And then on top of all that, especially as the brain has tripled in volume in just the last 3 million years, our profound social capabilities of primates and hominids and humans for relationships of various kinds. So there's a loose relationship between the management of these needs and our structure of our brain. That's why I kind of joke that routinely we need to pet the lizard, feed the mouse, and of course hug the monkey. Anyway, so okay, there's a little chart here of resources matched to needs. You can go back and take a look at it later. It just illustrates the broader point. Routinely, as a person who works with other people, I see that number 1, people come in with challenges this high, but resources this high. They need to scale up resources to match the problem. And second, they're unclear often about what resources would actually help. And so identifying resources that would actually help particular needs is really, really useful. And you can get into the detail of that later if you like. So finishing up in roughly the next minute, I want to point to a wider implication. At the individual level, as people develop psychological resources, they are more able to sustain resilient well-being in the face of the challenges of life. The point of all this for me is not how to withdraw from the world, sit on a cushion, go to a cave, bliss out, and bliss out. That's fairly easy and straightforward to do. The issue for me really is how to engage life fully, how to dream big dreams, how to swing for the fences, how to speak truth to power, how to enjoy the pleasures of life on the basis of an unshakable core of well-being, of feeling already safe enough inside, already satisfied enough inside, and already connected enough inside. In other words, with a kind of unshakable core deep down of peace, contentment, and love. That's the real challenge. And therefore, to me, that's the real opportunity. So this process of developing resources, as I've described, is absolutely key to growing that increasingly unshakable core. But it has wider implications because without getting into any particulars of politics, throughout human history, we've seen how vulnerable humans are to manipulations due to fear, greed, and us against them, grievances and conflicts. We've just seen profound vulnerabilities throughout history, and I think we've seen great vulnerabilities in the modern news cycle today. As people develop internal resources, in addition to changing the world for the better, but develop resources inside themselves, increasingly, they become less vulnerable to these classic manipulations of fear, greed, and us against them rivalries, which has a lot of wider implications. And I'm hopeful that the process of internalization and development of inner resources is a key part of helping the world come to a softer landing than the one it's aiming toward by the end of the century. To finish on my last slide, if you'll indulge me, a quotation from an ancient text, the Dhammapada. It's a saying that I think about many times. It really summarizes this process, I think, and why it's so hopeful, and why it also speaks to personal responsibility. Think not lightly of good, saying, it will not come to me. Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise one, gathering it little by little, fills oneself with good. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm grateful to you for what you do each day to help this world be better. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to open it up to questions. We have a door, we're going to put that up, but is there a question? Actually, Vin, do you want to take that? I'll open the door yet.
Yeah.
Over here.
Where's the question?
Hi, Rick. Thank you so much for being here. I have to tell you that I've been following you for many years, and truly, 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 this practice has changed my life in many positive ways, drop by drop. My question to you, and I've thought about it as I've read your books, and I still have like this internal doubt within me, is how do we cultivate the positive and take in the good while still allowing space for the negative, the shadow side, and the emotions that we maybe don't want to feel, so that this process doesn't become sort of a cover for that.
That's right. That's great. And I'm glad for you that it's been helpful. I'm really glad. Yeah. Well, you're getting at a really, really important question. And to be super clear, nothing that I'm talking about here is about looking on the bright side or fake it till you make it. I want to see the whole reality of life, the whole mosaic. I don't believe in positive thinking, but I want to see the whole mosaic with a brain that's designed to over-focus on that one flashing red tile, right? So if we fight our negative feelings, they just grow. If we are to be able to tolerate them and remain mindful of them, we must grow resources like perspective, steadiness of mind, self-soothing, self-compassion. So resources we grow inside ourselves help us accept and be with and bear our pain, including the pain that lands when we're compassionate for other people. So resources, growing resources, in part, is a means to the end of being able to be authentic and inclusive about everything we feel. One of my great journeys as I landed in adulthood, numb from the neck down, was to wake down, not just wake up, to include my own interior. But to do that, I needed to grow resources, because otherwise opening to my experience was like opening a trapdoor to hell. So that part. The other thing is that what happens as we grow resources inside, in addition to be able to bear our difficulties ourselves, we become much more able to deal with the negative things out in the world. We become more confident, more courageous, spunky, feisty, keep going. We're not going to be stopped because we have built up strengths inside. So to me, they really, really work together. And it's a key question you're raising. Absolutely key, absolutely central. Thank you. That's great.
Should we take one from the door?
If you want to read it with the mic.
How does one go about teaching kids early how to combat negativity bias and taking in the good that you talk about in your research? Could you help outline 3 clearly defined, simple, but effective steps that one can incorporate into their parenting starting tomorrow?
I wish more questions came to me in this form. Really clear, concise, direct. It's really great. Well, for one, I work with a lot of kids. I have a background there, and my dissertation actually was on 15-month-olds, so I have a real interest in early childhood too. So I think the question is really apt. So 3 practical suggestions. One is up to the age of around 14, when kids no longer will put up with their parents putting them to bed. That period just before sleep is a wonderful opportunity for a couple, 3 minutes to rest attention on something wholesome and beneficial for the child, which could be as simple as just feeling cozy and cuddly with a caregiver, or happy about the dog that's in the room, or talking about some neat thing that happened in the day. And then for those few minutes, just sort of marinate in the experience. I've known a number of families in which they started doing that with their kids, and there were fairly dramatic benefits. Part of it's implicit, obviously, sustaining a parent's attention, let's say, but I think in particular, there is some internalization. That's one. 2, in formal settings like school teachers, educators, or mindfulness coaches, there are so many opportunities that are natural moments to slow it down and help it sink in. When kids come back from recess, or after a period, or before going home, use those more formal opportunities for internalization, or similar opportunities like at meals in a family where people will just take a moment, with or without any religious framework, and just be grateful for the food. Just think of something, or just go around the room, what's one good thing that happened today? And it can be the same good thing every day. That's all right. But what's one good thing that happened today? People do different things at formal opportunities. And then the last is, with this particular child, or really any child, ask that question, what resources would really help if they were more present in the mind of the child? And know, what is it we're trying to develop in this child, not based on mom or dad's infinite wisdom, I speak from some experience here, some kind of lecture coming at the kid that they blow off, but from the child's perspective, what would the child be motivated to develop more inside themselves, especially social, emotional resources? And then if you know what you're trying to grow, which is where the issue is in most cases, people don't know what they're trying to grow. Know what you're trying to grow. If you know what you're trying to develop and encourage and nourish and protect in that child, then look for opportunities to have experiences of it, which then are internalized. I'll do that. Okay, good.
I know we're at time, so
Thank you.
Yeah, I know
Thank
some
you.
of you have to leave, so just want to give you another round of applause, and we can stay for more questions.
Oh, thank you.